to understand how physics can be applied to tug-of-war, you need to look at Newton's laws. Newton's first law states that an object at rest will remain at rest, and an object in motion will remain at a constant velocity unless a force is applied. This is generally referred to as the law of inertia. An object wants to keep doing what it's doing unless a force is applied.
Jumping ahead to the third law, this states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This means that whatever force an object pushes on something, the other object will push back with an equal amount of force.
There are 5 main forces when looking at the physical world. The first one is applied force, which is when an object is being pushed. Then there is normal force, which is when that object pushes back. Then there is gravitational force, which basically pushes every object downwards. The next type of force is tension force, which is when an object is being pulled from a rope that is attached to it. And finally, the most important force in this circumstance is friction.
Frictional force can only happen when another force is present, and it will usually work in the opposite direction of this force. It slows down a box after you push it, and is the reason why people originally thought that the natural state of objects was rest.
To calculate the frictional force, you must use the equation F of F equals mu n, where n is how much the ground is pushing up on you, in this case this is our weight, and mu is the coefficient of friction, which shows how rough a surface is. For example, it will be much easier to push an object on a hardwood floor than on a carpet because the hardwood floor has a lower coefficient of friction. This can be applied to tug-of-war because the coefficient of friction, mu, between the floor and people's shoes needs to be larger on one team for that team to win. The larger coefficient of friction allows for a greater frictional force, which allows the team to better stay in place.
What do you think is the most important thing to remember when playing tug-of-war?
Leverage.
When playing tug-of-war, I think it's all in the legs. I think if you have good legs, then you can really just power through.
I think you got to remember to wear gloves because you can burn your fingers, and you got to keep the footing really good. And like you got to pull.
What type of people would you like to recruit for your tug-of-war team?
Let's see. Strong, steady, someone that can stay low to the ground and maintain their balance, and someone of a big person for the anchor. Yeah, at the end.
Well, there are 2 people I like to recruit. The big guys, the anchors on the end, so you can add weight onto it, keep the other team from prevailing, and the people who have strong legs, as I said before.
I know exactly who I would recruit. Nick Apostolou, Don Marascio.
Butler.
Brandon Butler, good one. Malley would be on there, Chris Malley, because they're all like tough guys.
Jeremy.
And what kinds of things do you think help a team win?
Oh, definitely you have to be in sync with each other so that you're all tugging at the same time. If one is tugging while the rest are not tugging, getting their balance or whatever, throws the whole thing off. So everyone's got to be in sync. You almost need someone to keep them lined up, keep them syncopated, keep everybody pulling at the same time. Like the rowers have in the boats, where they have the person calling the rows and stuff like that. Yeah.
2 things: right leg, left leg. That's all I need.
Hands?
Hands would help, yes. Hands as well. Person with a physical body would also help, but mainly legs. If you have legs, you have a team.
Okay, thank you.
Just like really good teamwork, good vibe. Like if everybody likes each other, they're gonna pull together.
Don't kill the vibe.
All right.
Now for the experiment. We are going to put Emily and Jeffrey in different shoes and match them up against each other in a tug-of-war. Because Jeffrey and Emily have a relatively equal mass, the normal force will be the same, but the coefficient of friction will differ depending on the footwear, therefore allowing one of them to win.
So the first variable that we're going to test is our sneaker. And this is a pretty good rubber sole, so it would provide good traction at the ground and a good coefficient of friction. Now the next variable that we're going to test is a flip-flop, which also has a rubber sole, but it's not going to provide as good of a traction or not as good as a coefficient of friction. And then the last shoe that we're going to test is a high heel, which might not work out as well, because it's going to have less area to touch the ground with, and it also has more of a felt bottom, not so much a rubber bottom. And then the last thing that we're going to test, which is going to be our constant, which is going to be the bare soles of our feet.
Barefoot versus barefoot. Since the coefficient of friction is the same between the two players, there wasn't very much movement.
Versus flip-flops. The flip-flops have a lower coefficient of friction than bare feet do. So the one with the bare feet is winning.
Bare feet versus sneakers. The coefficient for bare feet and sneakers is similar. This is proved by the fact that there wasn't much movement.
Bare feet versus high heels. One can notice that the high heels slip, but the bare feet do not. Therefore, the coefficient of friction for the bare feet is greater than that for the heels.
Flip-flops versus sneakers. Sneakers have a greater coefficient of friction than flip-flops do. So the person wearing sneakers is winning.
Flops versus heels. Heels have a lower coefficient of friction than the flip-flops do. So the person with the flip-flops is winning.
Sneakers win!
In conclusion, we found that the soles of our bare feet had the highest coefficient of friction. After that came the sneakers, flip-flops, and finally the heels. This means that on a gym floor, your team would most likely be better off if everyone was barefoot than if they wore other types of shoes. However, if the floor is too dirty for your liking or your feet will start to hurt, then you should wear sneakers.
Macarena, que tu cuerpo para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Dale a tu cuerpo alegría, Macarena. Macarena. Macarena, que tu cuerpo para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Dale a tu cuerpo alegría, Macarena.